faces. And I will tell you that we don't do it alone. We're no longer content to be that solitary figure on the beach. And all of you out there, I just want to thank you for joining with us and being a part of the work that we're doing, helping to clear that beach. Because it does take a group of people thinking about innovation, thinking about different ways of doing things to solve this issue.
When asked to be on this panel and talk at the end of a 3-day conference when we're all exhausted and just a little ragged around the edges, it was a little daunting, but and we didn't really coordinate until today. We got our ducks in a row, but as with all housing developers, as some of you know, that I am a recovering architect and continue to be so. Thank you.
One day at a time.
One day at a time. And there are days that I go to work that it's hard to get out of bed, and there's days that I just can't deal with what's being tweeted, to dealing with my not so qualified low bidder on a housing development, and it just is hard. And what we do is not simple. And I guess my take on what we're putting out today is I wanted to tell you why I continue to do it. And I have 3 hopefully short stories that illustrate that. Because some days are really hard. And when I was walking through Equinox, one of our developments, doing a site visit during construction, we were behind schedule and fighting with not so qualified low bidders. And it was not a fun walkthrough. And we were going unit by unit, and there were some workers in one of the rooms, and I don't know why they heard us talking, but the electrician that was setting the final trim stopped what he was doing and turned around and looked at me, and he said, "This is a homework project?" And I was like, "Yes, yeah, it's a rental project, we're the developers." And he stopped what he was doing and he shook my hand and he said, "My wife and my young daughter and I took your class." The daughter wasn't there yet. And we bought our first home in Missoula, and it was because of your staff and your class that we were able to set ourselves up. It took a few years, but we're in our own home, and just thank you. And for me, I had nothing to do with that. But I also was just really proud of my coworkers and the work we do as a global, because it's not just development, it's not just home buyer, it's a bigger picture. So I remember that comment and that moment. And then there's another time, and I don't remember when. It was probably while we were building Solstice. I had the luxury of going to a NeighborWorks training down in New Orleans, and I sat next to Tony. And he was from Montana, and he worked for CAPS, I believe, up in Kalispell. And we got to chatting, and he realized that I was working for Homeward, and he told me, "Oh, that's wonderful. My son is applying to live at Solstice, when you get done." And I was like, "Oh, that's really great. I'm glad he's going to have a good home, and we'd love to have him." And he said, "No, you don't understand. My son was headed to Juilliard. He was a dancer, and he had an accident, and he had brain damage." So I see Paul every day ride his tricycle bike over the bridge, down the road to Home Resource. I promised I wouldn't do this, but I know that he lives in a safe place, and I know that the people at Home Resource, one of our great partners in Missoula, they love him too, and that makes me happy, even on the shitty days. So I just wanted to say, and I could probably toss out a few more, but there's the reason that I just stick with the hard things, and the reason that we do what we do, and I nod to Ravonda, thank God you've stuck around for 30 years almost. Yeah, close. It's not the lifetime, don't worry. But Jacob, thinking outside the box, and basically all of you that lend, develop, educate, we're all in this together. And I had a trainer tell me at one point, he just stopped what he was doing and told me, "Thank you." So I want to take that moment to say thank you to my lenders, my state agencies, my city council members, my partners and cohorts in this process, because there's going to be some days that are pretty rough, but we're in this together, and it's worth the fight. So thank you.
Yeah. Man, how do I follow that up? Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Davis with Homeward, and thank you for letting us share success stories and why it is that we are so dedicated to this work and to this lifestyle. And I often reflect on my own personal upbringing about why the work that we all do every day is so meaningful. I grew up in Kalispell, Montana, and my parents were renters my whole life, and for the most part until I was basically out of the house and they decided to buy a house. But it worked out for them at that point. My dad was a starving artist, that's a real thing. And my mom was a union waitress, and much like the good staff of this hotel, she worked for a hotel in Kalispell. And for 30-something years was a professional waitress. And so, as you can imagine, we just didn't have a lot of resources, but we had homes that we could afford. And we didn't grow up in, I didn't grow up in properties that we all developed that might be, utilizing some of the financing sources. But it was at a time and a place in Kalispell when homes were more affordable, that a professional waitress and a professional artist that was struggling could pay their rent. And so we lived in good neighborhoods, and I could ride my bike to school, and I knew my neighbors, and we had gardens, and it was this quality of life that I realized impacted my world so greatly. And it impacted my frame of how I see the world and how I want other people to experience the world. And so that's why I value so much about the work that we do, because we take great care in thinking about how it is that the building that we're building impacts somebody's life. It's their environment, where it's located, how close it is to school and to jobs. It makes all the difference in the world, right? To that one starfish or to that many starfish. And so it's just really a privilege. I'd love to reflect back on that. And people ask me often how I got involved in this work, and I too was waiting tables and cocktail waitressing after getting my university degree. And I was working a day job because I needed to start to have some form of professional job, but it was outside sales, and it was miserable. But I wasn't making enough money, so I had to have two jobs, right? Like many people, working two jobs. And I met my friend Kim Skufka, who also needed to work two jobs because she was working in retail. And she was a manager at Herberger's department store, but she was a single mom, and it wasn't enough her salary wasn't enough, and she wanted to work a night job. We became friends, and I was telling her about my desire to change business from the inside out. That was my goal after graduating. And she said, I think I know of this place that you should apply to. I'm on the board of directors because I live at one of their properties. So Homeward is a community housing development organization, and one of the ways that we meet that designation is we have tenant representation or representatives from certain areas of town that might live in where there's a certain number of folks earning below 80% of the area median income. So she's on our board, and she said, I think you should apply. And that was 17 years ago. She had no influence. But I just, it's amazing when I think about her successes. She lived in our Fireweed Court property for 10 years or more. She saved $100 a month for 10 years. She took our financial education class, our homebuyer education class. And eventually she bought her own home in Missoula. And she raised her son. That man is now working in the Bay Area with a dual degree, one from Vassar and one from Dartmouth University. And because of the dedication that we've had to sustainability and green building, it influenced what he wanted to do for his career. And so that's what he went and sought, and now he's an environmental engineer, and he's changing the world for the good. And so it is a long game. It's a long game when we're changing people's lives, but it is worth it. Every day that we do this, it is so worth it. And we have a short video that we'd like to share with you. It's something that we do have on our website, so it's easily findable, but I'd like to share that with you now. Thanks, Todd.
Farseth. I work for Inc. Realty Group. I'm a realtor. I have a lovely husband, Aaron, who is a small business owner in town. He owns Garage Tees. My daughter, Sophia, she's 14. She goes to school at Hellgate. And I have son 3, Peter, and our dog Gladys, and our cat Alan. My favorite thing, being a mom, that's always what I wanted to be. In 4th grade, when we had to write our essay about what you want to be when you grow up, I wrote about being a mom. I came to live at the Gold Dust because years ago, I had been living with a friend. My daughter was really little. She was about 3. We had been living in a house that was full of mold, and we didn't know that. But I had been really sick for a really long time. And we couldn't figure out what was going on. And one day, my roommate and I came home from work, and there had been a hot water leak, and the steam had bloomed all of the mold in our house, and everything was just covered. And so I didn't really know what to do. I had to move out. My roommate and friend at the time wasn't able to move with us, and it's really difficult to find affordable housing when you're living single mom, you don't have anyone to share the expenses with, and you have to be really careful about who you invite into your home and into your space. And so a friend of mine was living at the Gold Dust at the time, another single mom, and she told me about it. And so I went and asked about it. There happened to be an apartment coming up available, so I went through the application process and I went through the interview process. And thankfully we were able to move in, and really as soon as I did, my health 100% improved. Living in the Gold Dust was really an amazing experience for me. It was a very positive move. For the first time in, I don't know, probably ever, I felt like I was in a safe place, a healthy place, a place where I could really feel comfortable with my neighbors and feel like I could rely on them. We were all kind of in the same boat. I was fortunate that a lot of our kids were the same age, and so they could run around, and it felt really good to be able to say, like, yeah, you can go outside and play and not feel like, you know, something terrible was going to happen, because the yard was really unsafe, or the house was really unsafe. And living in the Gold Dust was what made it possible for me to go back to school, because I could afford to pay my rent and still be able to go to classes. It was really an empowering experience to be with all of these people who were really trying to work on making good choices and living a more successful life. I think that because we were all kind of in the same situation, it made it easier to feel okay and to kind of, you know, take the steps to move forward. I think it is very empowering for people to use that as a stepping stone, to say, I'm gonna go from this place that's not very affordable and really not very safe, stable housing in safe, stable communities, and you know, be able to go to a nice place where it feels good to be home. It feels like you're providing for your family, and because of that, it builds people up, and you know, that's what makes people able to take those steps, take those risks, you know, because they have a solid ground under their feet, whereas before it may have been too shaky to be able to feel confident in taking those risks. Life is great, and I actually really believe it has a lot to do with the time I spent at the Gold Dust, because it was really a confidence builder. I had mentioned that I was able to go to school because I could afford to, because I was living there, and that led to so many more opportunities and opened doors for me. And because of that, I was able to be more successful professionally, which led to us, you know, being able to afford a house of our own. And I really don't think that that would have been as achievable as it was had Homeward not been there for me when I really needed it.
Oh, is this all right, round two. Mary Kelly, I promise she was a part-time student and that she met all the student verification for a low-income housing tax credit project. Little inside joke for light tech compliance there. One of the things that obviously that illustrated was somebody that was, able to be their own best advocate and take what opportunities were offered and really grow. But part of